It's 3 a.m. in Los Angeles, and the city looks different at this hour. Quieter, colder, and brutally honest. Under a concrete overpass, where the streetlights flicker just enough to reveal outlines of human bodies curled beneath blankets, a man sits awake, rubbing his hands for warmth. His jacket is too thin for the night air. His stomach has been empty for nearly 24 hours. A few feet away, a young woman sleeps with her backpack clutched to her chest. Not for comfort, but because it holds everything she still owns. No one stirs when a siren screams in the distance. They've learned to sleep through chaos. This is the opening chapter of a reality most Americans never see up close. In the land of plenty, the wealthiest nation on earth, more than 500,000 people have no home tonight. That number is staggering. But numbers can't shiver, can't cry, can't lose hope. People can. And across the country, millions now live so close to the edge that a single misfortune, a lost job, a medical bill, a rent increase, could push them into the same cold darkness. Imagine an 8-year-old girl in Phoenix doing homework in the back seat of a car, while her mother keeps the dome light on so she can see the page. Imagine a retired nurse in Florida rationing her blood pressure medication because she doesn't have insurance anymore. Imagine a teenager in Seattle staring up at luxury high-rises from the sidewalk where she sleeps, wondering how a country with so much abundance could leave her here. These aren't dramatic exceptions. These are everyday stories in America now. And homelessness rarely arrives all at once. For many, it begins quietly. A notice taped to the door, a job cut without warning, an unexpected illness that drains every dollar saved. One moment, life feels stable enough. The next, the ground gives way. You tell yourself you'll recover. You pack a few things, thinking it's temporary. But temporary stretches into weeks, then months, then a reality you never imagined could belong to you. Experts describe homelessness as a collision of multiple crises: soaring rents, stagnant wages, medical debt, mental health challenges, broken safety nets, generational poverty. But those terms feel too clean, too distant. The truth is messier. A tangle of systems that stopped working long before people ended up on the street. In cities like Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York, and Seattle, the housing market has transformed into something unrecognizable to the average worker. The cost of a modest apartment can require 3 full-time minimum wage jobs. Even middle-class families struggle. For many Americans, affordable housing is no longer a given. It's a fantasy. But homelessness isn't always visible. Some people sleep in cars parked behind grocery stores. Some rotate between friends' couches. Others check into cheap motels for a few nights at a time, hoping to stretch a paycheck far enough. Sociologists call this hidden homelessness. For the people living it, it feels like slowly disappearing, one night, one favor, one borrowed room at a time. Then there are the ones who never imagined they'd be here at all. People with degrees, people who have worked their entire lives, people who once owned homes. Their stories break another myth, that homelessness is only about addiction or bad choices. In reality, it often begins with something much simpler. One moment of bad luck landing in the wrong life at the wrong time. What makes this all the more tragic is the backdrop. America is a nation where skyscrapers rise higher each year, where billion-dollar companies expand overnight, where wealth accumulates faster than at any point in history. And yet, beneath the glow of those towers, tents multiply like shadows that won't go away. It's a contrast that feels almost surreal. Prosperity touching the sky, while desperation clings to the sidewalk below. A portrait of a country that has drifted dangerously far from its promise. Homelessness isn't just poverty. It's exhaustion. It's the fear of sleeping because something might happen if you close your eyes. It's being cold even in summer because stress burrows deeper than weather. It's the humiliation of being watched, judged, avoided. It's loneliness so heavy it becomes a second skin. One woman in San Francisco described it like this: "It's not that people don't care. It's that they're afraid. They think if they look at us too long, they'll see their own reflection." In a country where so much is possible, how did this become normal? How did thousands of families, seniors, veterans, and children end up outside, invisible, unheard? The truth is painful, but necessary. Homelessness in America didn't happen by accident. It happened because the systems meant to protect people failed. Slowly, quietly, and for decades. And yet, even in the harshest corners of the night, there is something persistent, almost defiant, that refuses to die. Hope. Hope in small acts of kindness. Hope in the belief that tomorrow might be better. Hope in the simple human desire for a place to belong. This story begins in darkness, but it does not end there. For decades, the story of homelessness in America has been shaped not by a single cause, but by a series of slow-moving shifts, economic, political, and cultural, that gradually pulled the floor out from under millions of people. To understand how the crisis became what it is today, you have to trace the long road behind it, back to the moments when the American dream quietly began to slip out of reach. In the middle of the 20th century, home ownership felt almost guaranteed for many Americans. A steady job often meant a stable life. Factories paid living wages, unions protected workers, and the cost of housing stayed within reach. But while that era is often remembered with nostalgia, it was fragile, built on conditions that would not survive the decades to come. Beginning in the 1980s, major policy shifts changed the landscape. Federal funding for affordable housing was cut dramatically. Entire mental health institutions were closed with the promise that community-based support would replace them, support that never arrived. Thousands of vulnerable people, many struggling with untreated illnesses, were suddenly left to fend for themselves. What began as a policy decision turned into a humanitarian crisis that cities were unprepared to absorb. As manufacturing jobs disappeared and wages stagnated, another force rose quietly but relentlessly: the cost of housing. In cities across the country, from San Diego to Boston, rent increased faster than incomes could keep up. The safety margin that once protected Americans from homelessness eroded year by year. A car repair, a medical bill, a month of reduced hours. Any of these could trigger a downward spiral. And for many, it did. By the time the 2008 financial crisis hit, millions were already one crisis away from losing everything. Foreclosures swept across the nation. Families who once lived in suburban homes found themselves packing belongings into storage units, checking into motels, and praying for a second chance. For some, that second chance never came. But while the economy eventually recovered, the housing market transformed into something unrecognizable. Investors began buying entire neighborhoods, turning homes into rental assets. Rents soared. Wages did not. In many cities, a one-bedroom apartment now costs more than what a full-time worker earns in a month. Even middle-class families suddenly found themselves living close to the edge. That edge is crowded now. Teachers, grocery clerks, restaurant workers, delivery drivers, people who keep America running, struggle to afford basic shelter. They are the working homeless, a phrase that shouldn't exist and yet describes millions. Some sleep in cars and go to work in the morning. Some rotate between a friend's couch and a relative's living room. Some hide their situation from coworkers and even their own children. Homelessness has also expanded far beyond major cities. It now reaches into rural communities, small towns, and suburban developments. Shelters in places like Montana, Kentucky, and Oklahoma report record numbers, the most they've seen in their histories. Many of these regions lack public transportation, medical facilities, and social services, leaving people stranded without support. It's a crisis spreading into every corner of the country, no longer confined to a few metropolitan areas. Yet even as homelessness becomes more widespread, misconceptions persist. Many Americans still cling to the idea that homelessness is primarily caused by addiction or personal failings. But the data paints a more complicated picture. The leading cause of homelessness in most regions is simply the cost of housing. You don't have to be struggling with addiction to be unable to afford a $2,000 apartment. You just have to live in modern America. Mental health struggles and substance use do play a role for some, but often as a consequence rather than a cause. Living on the street is traumatic. The constant stress, fear, sleep deprivation, and violence push people to survive however they can. People don't become homeless because they're addicted, one counselor in Denver says. They become addicted because they're homeless. The crisis is not just about roofs and walls. It is about the slow erosion of stability, the feeling that hard work will be rewarded, that doing the right things will keep you safe. Millions of Americans did everything they were told to do. They worked, saved, and stayed hopeful. And still, they fell. The truth is uncomfortable, but undeniable. Homelessness in America is not the failure of a few individuals. It is the symptom of a system stretched too thin for too long. A system where housing is treated like a luxury product, healthcare like a privilege, wages like a gamble, and social support like an afterthought. And yet, buried within this crisis is a quieter, more revealing truth. One that reshapes how we see the people living it. Homelessness, at its core, is not a story about broken people. It is a story about a broken structure. And the people surviving within it are not weak. They are enduring conditions most of us would never withstand for a single week. Their strength doesn't erase the crisis. It exposes it. And it forces us to ask a question few dare to confront. If this is what the American dream looks like now, who is it still working for? If you walk through any major American city today, you'll see a truth unfolding in real time. Two versions of America living side by side, barely acknowledging each other. One is the America of prosperity. Upscale apartments with rooftop pools, coffee shops filled with laptops and wireless earbuds. Shiny new developments promising unmatched luxury. The other is the America of survival. Tents lining sidewalks, blankets spread over heating grates, cardboard signs asking for help. People whispering to themselves as the world rushes past. The divide isn't theoretical, it's physical. It's a single street separating million-dollar condos from a man sleeping beside a dumpster. It's a highway overpass where, below, hundreds live in makeshift shelters, while just above them, commuters drive home to warm kitchens and soft beds. In Los Angeles, Skid Row stretches for more than 50 blocks. A dense concentration of human struggle that exists in the shadow of towering corporate offices. In San Francisco, the Tenderloin weaves homelessness directly into the city's daily rhythm. School buses idling beside tents, cafe owners sweeping debris off their doorsteps each morning. In Portland, entire neighborhoods have shifted to accommodate large encampments, each one a fragile community built from tarps, blankets, and whatever scraps people can salvage. But homelessness is not always where you expect it to be. In the suburbs of Arizona, families sleep in minivans outside Walmart parking lots. In rural Kentucky, People take shelter in abandoned barns when winter blows in. In Florida, seniors on fixed incomes live in aging RVs that barely run, parked in dirt lots far from town. Everywhere you look, you can see the question forming. How can homelessness be so widespread in a country with so much wealth? The answer is layered. First, the cost of living has surged far faster than wages. Rent increases that would once take place over a decade can now happen in a single year. A two-bedroom apartment that cost $900 a month in the 2000s might cost $2,200 today. Meanwhile, millions of Americans earn less than $15 an hour, a number that can barely cover groceries, let alone housing. Second, housing is increasingly treated as an investment commodity, not a fundamental human need. Investors buy homes in bulk, driving up prices and renting at rates ordinary families can never match. We're competing with invisible landlords, one social worker in Austin says. People aren't losing the housing market. The housing market has left them behind. Third, the social safety nets meant to catch people during hard times, unemployment support, mental health services, affordable health care, are often overwhelmed, underfunded, or too complicated to navigate. Many people don't get help until they're already in crisis. Some never get help at all. And then there's the emotional reality of homelessness, the part people rarely talk about. The fear that sets in when you realize you have nowhere to sleep. The shame of being watched, judged, or ignored. The exhaustion of constant hypervigilance, knowing that at any moment someone could steal your belongings or threaten your safety. The loneliness of feeling invisible. One woman living in a tent community in Seattle put it this way: "It's like being erased in slow motion. The more you struggle, the less people want to see you." Survival becomes an all-consuming job. Shelters often fill by late afternoon, so people line up for hours just for a chance at a bed. Some shelters split up families, accepting women in one area, men in another, leaving parents to choose between losing their children for the night or sleeping outside together. Others have strict curfews or time limits, meaning that even if you find a spot, it might only buy you a few days. Then there's the constant fear of encampment sweeps, when city workers and police clear tents from sidewalks. Personal belongings are often thrown away: medications, IDs, blankets, even the last photos of loved ones. Many people describe these sweeps as losing your life in 10 minutes. But in the shadows of this struggle, something else quietly forms: community. People share food, watch each other's tents, and check in during the coldest nights. A man in Phoenix wakes up early every morning to boil water for instant coffee and hands it out to his neighbors. In Chicago, a group of unhoused veterans take turns guarding the block so others can sleep. In Portland, a young couple living in their car offer rides to others trying to get to job interviews or medical appointments. This is the part of homelessness America rarely sees. Not just the suffering, but the compassion that rises inside it. People who have nothing still find ways to give. People who have lost their own homes still try to protect each other. And maybe that's the most heartbreaking truth of all. The people with the least often show the most humanity. Because homelessness isn't just a housing crisis. It's a crisis of connection, of who we notice, who we value, and who we choose to help. When you look closely at the streets, you don't just see tents. You see stories. You see unfinished lives. You see the cost of looking away. When you sit down with people who've lived through homelessness, you begin to understand how loss reshapes a life. Not in one sweeping moment, but in small, relentless increments. Each story reveals the quiet ways dignity is stolen, and the surprising ways resilience takes its place. Take Rosa, once a nursing assistant in Northern California. Her apartment building was sold to a developer, and tenants were given 60 days to leave. She tried everything: extra shifts, borrowing from friends, applying for rental assistance that never came through in time. When the deadline hit, she packed her belongings into 2 trash bags and slept in her car. "I kept going to work," she says, "but I started smelling like the car. People stopped talking to me." After missing too many shifts from exhaustion, she lost the job too. Now she lives in a small tent behind a hardware store, her nursing license still tucked inside a plastic folder, a symbol of the life she's trying to return to. Then there's Marcus from Atlanta. A construction worker for nearly 20 years, he hurt his back on the job. He tried to push through the pain, but the injury got worse. When the medical bills arrived, he sold his tools, then his truck, then his furniture. One by one, the pieces of his life were traded for survival. Now, he sleeps behind an abandoned building. "People think we're lazy," he says, "but I worked every day until my body said no." And Lena, just 19, from a small town in Oklahoma. When she came out as gay, her parents told her to leave. With nowhere to go, she took a bus to Dallas. She found seasonal work at a store, but when the job ended, so did her room in the shared rental. She spent weeks sleeping behind a church, terrified someone would hurt her. "It's not the hunger that gets you," she says. "It's the feeling that nobody cares if you vanish." These stories feel different, but they all share the same pattern: a sudden break, followed by a slide that becomes impossible to stop. People don't fall into homelessness because they're weak. They fall because the systems meant to catch them have too many holes. And once someone falls, climbing out is far harder than most imagine. Try finding a job without a shower or clean clothes. Try renting an apartment without pay stubs or good credit. Try getting medical care without insurance. Try proving your identity when your documents were stolen or thrown out during an encampment sweep. But even in these impossible conditions, humanity flickers brightly. In Portland, neighbors in a tent community take turns staying awake during stormy nights, checking on each other, making sure no one's tarp collapses under the rain. In New York, a group of unhoused veterans hold a Sunday cleanup in the park they call home. Picking up trash, sweeping sidewalks, restoring a sliver of dignity in a world that too often denies them any. And amid the struggle, there are fragile victories. A mother gets her kids into school despite sleeping in a van. A man lands a part-time job after weeks of rejection. A teenager escapes an abusive home and finds a youth shelter with real support. These moments don't erase the suffering, but they prove something powerful. People experiencing homelessness are not defined by what they've lost. They're defined by what they refuse to surrender: hope, kindness, willpower, community. Yet hope alone can't solve the crisis. Across America, shelters are full, wait lists stretch for years, and services are spread dangerously thin. People navigate a maze of requirements: sobriety tests, background checks, paperwork, appointments miles away. Many fall through the cracks simply because surviving each day leaves no energy for bureaucracy. And behind every hardship is the same haunting truth: homelessness is not a personal failure. It's the predictable outcome of an unaffordable country. If you strip away the labels and assumptions, you're left with this simple reality. Most people on the streets today once lived lives that looked a lot like ours. They had apartments, jobs, routines, dreams. Then something went wrong. Something that, in a different year or with a little less luck, could go wrong for any of us. Every story of homelessness reveals not just who is suffering, but how fragile security really is in modern America. And if we want to change the future, we have to confront that fragility head-on, with honesty, with compassion, and with the courage to rebuild a system where nobody has to face this kind of loneliness ever again. Across America, debates rage about how to solve the homelessness crisis and what solving it even means. City councils argue over zoning laws, budgets, and policing. Activists demand housing as a human right. Residents complain about tent encampments near their neighborhoods. And through it all, the people most affected are often left out of the conversation entirely. The simplest idea, and the one proven to work, is called housing first. The principle is straightforward. Give people a stable place to live first, then address everything else. Joblessness, addiction, mental health, trauma. Because no one can rebuild their life while sleeping on the sidewalk. It's not theory. It's evidence. Cities like Houston and Salt Lake City have cut chronic homelessness dramatically by following this approach. When people have a roof over their heads, they get healthier, find work, reconnect with family, and stay off the streets. But housing first isn't easy to scale. In Los Angeles, building one affordable unit can cost over $500,000, and construction can take years. In New York, bureaucratic red tape slows projects to a crawl. In San Francisco, neighborhood protests, the so-called not-in-my-backyard mindset, block housing proposals before they even break ground. The will to fix the problem often collapses under the weight of politics, paperwork, and fear. So cities resort to short-term fixes, sweeping encampments, opening temporary shelters, banning camping in public spaces. But moving people from one block to another isn't a solution. It's displacement disguised as progress. We clean the streets, one outreach worker in Portland says, but we don't clean the system. Meanwhile, the other roots of the crisis keep spreading. Mental health care remains broken, fragmented, and inaccessible. Millions live with untreated depression, schizophrenia, or PTSD. Conditions that make holding a job or maintaining housing nearly impossible without help. Addiction, often born from trauma or despair, further traps people in cycles of instability. Yet when people seek treatment, they find waiting lists months long and funding that barely exists. Law enforcement becomes the default responder, even when crime isn't the issue. Police officers are sent to manage mental health crises, drug overdoses, and encampments, problems better handled by doctors, counselors, or social workers. The result is predictable. People cycle between the streets, jails, and emergency rooms, at enormous human and financial cost. Still, there are glimpses of hope in unlikely places. In Houston, government agencies and nonprofits share a single database, ensuring no one falls through the cracks. Over 10 years, they've helped more than 25,000 people move from homelessness to housing. In Albuquerque, a city program offers day jobs cleaning parks and public spaces, paying people in cash daily, no paperwork, no background checks. For many, it's the first step towards stability. In Missoula, Montana, tiny home villages provide private, safe spaces that cost a fraction of traditional housing projects, restoring autonomy and dignity. Then, there are local heroes working quietly outside the spotlight. A church in Nashville turned its parking lot into a safe sleep area with security, bathrooms, and outreach services. In Chicago, a retired nurse drives around each evening, distributing socks, blankets, and blood pressure checks. In Phoenix, volunteers run mobile showers and laundry vans that bring hygiene and humanity to people forgotten by policy. These efforts don't end homelessness, but they do something equally important. They remind people that they still matter. They keep hope alive until the system catches up, because homelessness, at its heart, is not just about missing housing. It's about missing connection. It's about what happens when a society decides comfort for some matters more than dignity for all. If you look at every successful program, from Utah's housing model to Houston's partnerships, they all share one thing: belief. Belief that every person deserves a home, no exceptions. Belief that compassion is cheaper than neglect. Belief that it's not enough to feel sorry. We have to act. America has the money. It has the resources. It has the space. What it needs most is the will. The will to treat homelessness not as a shame to hide, but as a wound to heal, one that belongs to all of us. Despite the staggering scale of the crisis, across the country, small revolutions of hope are quietly taking root. They don't always make headlines, but in alleys, church basements, and parking lots, you can see the shape of a different future, one built not on pity, but on possibility. In Seattle, volunteers spend their weekends constructing tiny wooden houses from donated lumber. Each one is barely 120 square feet, yet inside are warmth, safety, and a door that locks, something many haven't had for years. They're not mansions, says Dennis, a retired carpenter who leads the project, but they give people back the feeling that this is my space. That matters. In Los Angeles, a program called the Midnight Mission runs a 24-hour recovery and job placement center downtown. There, hundreds of unhoused people come each day to eat, shower, and learn new skills. Some stay only a few weeks. Others rebuild entire lives. We're not just giving out food, a volunteer explains. We're giving out second chances. In Houston, collaboration between nonprofits and government has turned coordination into a movement. Data sharing ensures every name on the street connects to a real plan: housing options, mental health services, job support. Over a decade, their approach has reduced homelessness by more than 60%. Their secret isn't money, it's unity. We stopped competing, one director says. We started working together. And in Chicago, a cafe called The Haven Table employs people who've lived on the streets. No resumes, no interviews, just a chance. Employees wash dishes, serve customers, learn finances, and eventually move into management. For many, it's their first paycheck in years. The owner, once homeless herself, smiles as she pours coffee. You can't fix someone's life overnight, she says, but you can remind them they have one. These pockets of compassion prove something powerful. Homelessness is not inevitable. It's not a natural disaster. It's the result of choices, and it can be undone by new ones. Every successful project starts with one simple belief: people deserve stability before they can rebuild. But there's a deeper truth too, one that these programs understand instinctively. You can build homes, but if you don't rebuild community, the cycle continues. Many people lose their homes because they first lost connection, family ties, support networks, trust. The road back often begins not with a house key, but with a handshake. With someone saying, "You're not invisible. You still belong here." That sense of belonging is what every human being craves. And what homelessness erodes first. One outreach worker in Portland describes her job this way: it's not about rescuing people. It's about standing next to them until they remember who they are. Across the nation, small innovations point toward what a larger solution could look like. Abandoned motels converted into transitional housing, unused office buildings redesigned as apartments, empty lots turned into tiny home villages. Cities experimenting with Housing First Plus models, combining shelter with healthcare, therapy, and job placement, are seeing fewer people return to the streets. It's not charity, it's strategy. and it's starting to work. Because when people have a stable home, everything else becomes possible. They can apply for jobs, manage medical conditions, reconnect with family, rebuild identity. The downward spiral reverses, slowly, one person at a time. Ask anyone who's made it off the street, and they'll tell you, the first night inside feels unreal. "I left the lights on," says Terrence, a veteran who spent years living in his van. "I couldn't sleep in the dark. It didn't feel safe yet. But by the second week, I started to dream again." That's what a home really gives you. Not just walls, but the space to dream. And if there's one lesson in all these stories, it's that compassion, when organized, is stronger than crisis. America has everything it needs to end homelessness. The wealth, the technology, the buildings, the people. The only question left is whether it has the heart. Dawn rises over a city that never truly sleeps. Sunlight spills across rooftops, glints off the glass of high-rise apartments, and filters down to the sidewalks below, where the day begins differently for thousands of people who have no address. A man rolls up his sleeping bag before the street cleaners arrive. A woman checks her reflection in a store window, fixing her hair before heading to a job interview she hopes will change everything. Children in a shelter cafeteria wait in line for cereal before walking to school, pretending they live somewhere else. It's a new morning, but for many, the cycle feels the same. Hope, effort, exhaustion, repeat. And yet, something is shifting. Across the country, more people are talking openly about homelessness, not as a distant issue, but as a national test of conscience. Documentaries, social media campaigns, and community coalitions are changing the narrative. This is not a fringe crisis. It's our crisis. The American dream is not supposed to end under a freeway bridge. Local leaders are beginning to connect the dots between homelessness and everything else: the economy, healthcare, education, and mental health. Cities are rethinking outdated models of charity and moving towards solutions rooted in dignity. A few have even started treating housing as infrastructure, as essential as roads or electricity. "You can't have a functioning economy," one mayor said, "if half your workforce can't afford to live near their jobs." These shifts are slow, but they matter. When people stop blaming the homeless and start asking why homelessness happens, change begins. Because the truth is, homelessness isn't an identity. It's a condition. It doesn't define people. It confines them. And when you remove the walls of judgment, you see the person still standing underneath. Rosa, the nursing assistant who once lived in her car, now rents a studio through a rapid rehousing program. She works at a community clinic and spends her weekends volunteering at a food pantry. "I used to think people didn't see me," she says. "Now I make sure they see others like I was." Marcus, the injured construction worker, joined a re-employment initiative for skilled laborers. His back still hurts, but he trains apprentices now. Young people learning trades that might keep them off the streets. "Someone gave me one more shot," he says. "That's all it takes. One." And Lena, the teenager from Oklahoma, found her way into a youth housing program in Dallas. She's taking classes to become a counselor for LGBTQ+ teens. "I want to help kids who feel invisible," she says, smiling, "because I know what it's like to disappear. Their lives are proof that homelessness is not permanent, not when society decides it shouldn't be." The road forward won't be easy. It will require policy shifts, public will, and sustained compassion. But it begins with something simple: seeing. Seeing people as they are, not as their worst moment. Because every time someone looks away from a person sleeping on the street, the crisis grows stronger. And every time someone stops, listens, or offers help, even a small gesture, the balance tilts toward hope. Maybe that's the lesson in all of this, that a nation's greatness isn't measured by its wealth, but by what it refuses to abandon. And if America, the land of plenty, chooses to face this crisis with empathy instead of indifference, then the morning light that touches the streets won't just reveal struggle anymore. It'll reveal renewal. Proof that even in the coldest corners of our cities, the promise of home can still find its way back. By nightfall, the city softens again. The noise fades. The lights blur. And America's forgotten streets come alive in a quieter rhythm. Fires flicker in metal barrels. Voices murmur beneath the overpasses. The same nation that sends rockets to Mars still has people sleeping under cardboard tonight. And yet, beneath the sorrow, there's something else moving. Something fierce, human, unbreakable. In the heart of San Diego, a group of volunteers walks through encampments with flashlights, handing out sandwiches, socks, and bottled water. They know most names by heart. "Hey, Gloria," one says. "You doing okay tonight?" Gloria nods and smiles, showing the gap in her teeth. "Still breathing," she says. "Still here." Across the country, in the chill of a New York evening, a man named Terrence locks the door of his small apartment, his first home in 7 years. The walls are bare, the furniture second-hand, but it's his. He sits on the edge of the bed, hands trembling, overwhelmed by silence. For the first time in years, there's no traffic roaring overhead, no footsteps near his head, no fear that morning will bring eviction. "I didn't know peace could be this loud," he whispers. Moments like these, fragile, ordinary, miraculous, remind us what's at stake. Homelessness isn't just a statistic or a political argument. It's about people fighting to reclaim something most of us take for granted. The right to rest without fear. The path forward will demand more than sympathy. It will demand reimagining what home means in America. It means creating housing that's affordable, wages that are livable, health care that doesn't destroy savings, and systems that treat mental illness with care, not punishment. It means measuring success not by profit margins, but by how few people are left outside when the sun goes down. And maybe above all, it means redefining community, not as a collection of separate lives, but as a shared responsibility. Because no one survives alone. Every tent, every cardboard sign, every quiet plea for change, they're all mirrors. They show us who we are and who we could become. If we can learn to see them not as shame, but as a call to act, to care, to build something better, then perhaps this story doesn't have to end in despair. Maybe the next chapter of America isn't about wealth at all. Maybe it's about the courage to make sure that in this land of plenty, no one is left sleeping in the shadows of abundance. Because ending homelessness isn't just possible, it's necessary. It's a test of who we are when no one's watching. And someday, when the last tent is folded, the last street corner cleared, and every person has a door to lock and a bed to call their own, we might finally remember what home was always meant to mean.